Welcome to Real World NP's Clinical Pearls, where we take gems from full-length episodes and break them into quick, digestible insights. I'm Liz Rohr, family nurse practitioner, and my pronouns are they, she. Real World NP is a continuing education company for nurse practitioners in primary care, especially new nurse practitioners navigating the role transition from RN to NP. Whether you're on your commute between patients or prepping for an exam, these bite-sized takeaways can help you build confidence in your practice. Let's dive in.
The job doesn't want to be responsible at work for someone who, comes in and has a stroke or a heart attack because they can't manage their care. But they also want to know, they also don't want to put someone out who may not need to be put out of work, right? Because that is costly for them. So I think those specifics, would be more helpful on FMLA. Pre-op clearances, I see crazy things with those too, but the surgeon wants to know that they're not going to get in trouble for taking care of a patient who is not really medically ready. And so, it is important that we're doing the hemoglobin A1Cs and the blood sugars and whatever other pre-testing that needs to be done, the EKGs and all of those things, and ensuring that they're accurate and correct or done in a timely manner so that the surgeon's not put at risk. Because I think what people don't understand about a pre-op clearance, it really gives the surgeon an idea and the anesthesiologist an idea of what protections they need to put in place to protect themselves, to make sure that the patient doesn't die on the table, and now they're being sued. Right. So it's like, if we have to think of these documents as a team effort, it's not just you protecting yourself, it's not you just protecting the patient, you're also protecting the next provider when it comes to the pre-op clearance. So it does need to be detailed. All the sections should be filled out. You shouldn't just see, sometimes you can see, attachments or things like that when it's too wordy, but you want to make sure that you're referring them back to something, that you're not just things blank, and then, asking them to assume that that hasn't been done.
Yeah. I think the understanding that I've pulled, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think there's kind of two things. One is making sure that it's documenting their kind of current clinical status appropriately, doing the testing that they've requested. And then, which is actually kind of a side conversation. There's I think Curbsiders has a podcast about the evidence around how much testing we actually need to do versus what makes us feel better, whatever. I just kind of go based on what they need from me. And then the other thing is you can say no contraindications for surgery, but not to say clearance. And I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if you have any thoughts about the verbiage to say because if you say clearance, then that you're more on the hook or something. I don't know. It may be totally false.
Yeah, I don't think that's true. I wouldn't say no contraindications, because there may be a contraindication of why they may not need the surgery, but it may, the benefit analysis may be that it's more important that they get the surgery, even though it may be a risk that they may die. Right. So I wouldn't say no contraindications, because a lot of times patients do have contraindications of why they shouldn't go to surgery.
Right. But it's more like a risks benefit discussion, it sounds like.
Yeah, just definitely. That is really up to the surgeon to have. So I definitely wouldn't write no contraindications. And I don't think clearance or anything, that those specifics make you more on the hook or not. Because all you're doing, I think the pre-op clearance really is what the provider is what the surgeon is asking for, the surgical team may be asking for. It's not asking you to say this patient is not going to die if they get to surgery. That's not their expectation.
Right.
Their expectation is that you just do whatever it is that we ask you to do to make sure that we're protected and we have a good idea. And I think sometimes people underestimate the power of those documents, because the anesthesiologist really is the person who takes into consideration some of that information for themselves and how they're going to manage the patient. So you don't put that the patient has sleep apnea.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
And that they are not on their machine and they're not taking it seriously, and they're not, that's a huge,
it's important. Really important.
Very important for an anesthesiologist or a nurse anesthetist to take into consideration when they're putting someone to sleep, right? So that's what it really is. It's making sure you're putting enough information for the next provider to be able to protect themselves.
Totally. And then I think like the clinical, because I can hear the questions of like the clinical questions, like your decision, like that is a separate topic, I think, for NPs to dig into, is like having the conversations about the risk benefits and deciding if it's appropriate. Like that's a separate conversation. We're mostly talking about like, once you've had that conversation, what you're documenting
Yeah.
and all that stuff.
But I don't think it's really up to even the primary provider to decide if it's appropriate. It's up to the surgeon,
Yeah,
because
it's
some
both.
surgeons
Yes.
are risky and then
Yes.
like, yeah, you've had 5 open heart surgeries and you have all these stents put and you have a high risk of getting a blood clot.
Right.
But if we don't fix your aneurysm, you're going to die tomorrow,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And you as a provider may say, ooh, this patient may not be ready to be cleared, but the surgeon may say, you know, it may have reasons as to why they want to move forward.
Right. Right.
So yes, like definitely both, but it's like, I don't think that you guys should take on so much
Yeah,
pressure,
you're right. You're
because
right.
the risk that comes out of it, I feel like there's very rarely been instances where the pre-op clearance is why someone gets sued.
Yeah.
They never really go back to that. Like even the
If there's a
surgeries that
problem,
I've had, the surgeries that I've seen have been really big payouts or really big cases. It never really boils down to the pre-op or to the primary provider. It is what the surgical team did or didn't do, and never what they took into consideration. It usually has to do with the outcome. So was the surgeon actually capable of, you know, well trained or had the resources or whatever to do the surgery that they did, and was the outcome a part of the risk that were explained to the patient?
Right. That's
right? And so I think that is usually what happens when I've seen the ugliest cases. It's usually like the surgeon did something egregious, pre-op cleared or not. It was not the primary care provider's, you know, problem. And I think it's hard to go that far back for an attorney. Like I think people think that people are looking for people to sue. No. I know so many attorneys who will turn down a case in a second. Like they're like, I'm not doing that. Like it's too because it's costly to try to go after and find out the right information to review it's expensive for the attorney, because you don't get paid unless they get paid. So unless it's a straight shot, it's very rare that an attorney's going to invest the time and the money to go after a primary provider in a situation where the surgeon, who has more coverage, who has more malpractice insurance, who's covered by a hospital. We're not going after the primary care provider, right? So I think when you think about it like that, not to say you should completely relax about it, but I think you should take into consideration that like people aren't going to backtrack that far and try to put some type of blame on you, because then it's going to be like, okay, I said that they were cleared. That had this outcome had nothing to do.
Really work like that. Yeah,
it doesn't. It rarely ever works. It goes that far back.
Totally. Well, should we wrap up?
Yeah. I think someone was asking a little bit about fraud.
Yes.
If people want to talk about like fraud, I do some things on Instagram talking about fraud.
Yes.
But the Office of the Inspector General puts out a report every day, pretty much. But you can go to the Office of the Inspector General, which is the feds, basically, and look at the cases that they're going, like the people who they're either indicting or sending to jail, or
I'm like so nosy. That's like a murder crime series.
They're so good and so funny. People are.
I've seen some of your posts. We were like,
girl, how did you think you were going to get a kickback? Oh, come on. A hot mess. So they're juicy and fun. Like, so but literally it's the same thing happening over and over. Like people are doing crazy things, and like someone is now looking for the money and trying to account for that, and now all of a sudden their whole plan is exposed. So if you have questions about fraud, that's a good place to start, because the feds are way more aggressive than the states when it comes to fraud. But the feds are aggressive. So
they do not play.
They don't play. If they review 100 charts and 2 charts show that they overbilled, they're gonna take that whatever that percentage is and times all of your patients the past year, and you're gonna pay them that money back.
Oh my. So this applies to me too.
Oh, definitely applies. Definitely applies. About billing is like, we can have a whole conversation about billing.
Yes.
All that usually in the hospitals, that's what really happens. Even in this conversation, we talked a little bit about decreasing liability and mitigating risk. But I'm working on something to really educate people on how to do that, because I think that is a it's what we're kind of talking about today.
Yeah.
And people want to know, like, how can I prevent this from happening?
Mhm.
And I think that most people are doing the right things. I think
Yeah.
most providers are doing the right things.
Yeah.
I think in 6 years, maybe 6,000 nurses and nurse practitioners have lost their license. Like, and there are thousands and thousands,
Enjoyed this clinical pearl? There's even more valuable insight in the full episode. Click the link in the description to hear the complete discussion, packed with practical tips to strengthen your skills and confidence as a nurse practitioner. Don't miss it. And if you found this helpful, be sure to like, subscribe, and share with your fellow NPs so we can keep learning together.